So I watched the video footage of people storming the U.S. Capitol, captured by a New Yorker reporter, and I was really shocked and was sad to see these people. And the most impressive thing about the video was that these people, for some reason or another, showed signs of hubris, and they were so self-confident. And I was wondering where this self-confidence came from. I'm based in Tokyo, and I'm accustomed to the Japanese mannerism. And as you may be aware, in Japan, people are very polite, and we bow to each other and show respect to people. And that is carried over to social protests, and Japanese protesters tend to be really polite and orderly, and which has its own problems because when you show civil disobedience, you need to be more expressive, and that's the only problem of Japan. But when I saw these people, rioters storming the U.S. Capitol, I could see there were other problems, unique to the United States, and which was, people can be too expressive without any substantial reasoning behind that. This election, I'm not an American citizen, so I can only say from outsider's view, this election was most probably won by Joe Biden and not by Donald Trump. That seems to be clear from the evidence and data and the statistics. And Mr. Trump, for some reason or another, didn't admit that defeat. In English, I know there are these expressions like bad losers and good losers, which we have in Japan too. I mean, in Japanese we say isagi-ii, which means you are good loser. Isagi-yoi means you admit your defeat with grace, and that is actually the aesthetics of the Japanese people. Like in a small boot, if you lose, you do not show your disgust to the opponent. You just bow and go out of the ring in a respectable manner. So I've always thought that it was a really great American tradition to congratulate your opponent when you lose in a presidential election. That was the beauty of the American democracy from my perspective, because that is an aesthetics that we share from Japanese perspective. To admit that you were defeated, and probably your opponent had more point and had more popular support. That's the name of the game. So when Mr. Trump didn't show this grace, traditional grace, that was an amazement, and I felt a bit sad as a great fan of the United States. Having said that, it seems that Mr. Trump's denial of what is evident seems to have fueled these people who stormed the U.S. Capitol, and they seem to be so confident, equipped with hubris without any reason. Hubris without reason was probably the summary of my impression from watching this video footage. They went into the sacred chamber where the elected members would debate and proceed with the machinery of democracy. But these people, they did not have any business of doing anything there. Of course, they are the American people. They have the voting rights, but they do not have any business going into these chambers and the havoc to, the established procedures. I mean, of course, this is a democracy, and in democracy, grassroots opinions are important, but that should be expressed through law and order. Actually, ironically, a phrase quite loved by Mr. Trump. You know, if you do not obey order, law and order in expressing your views, then it's not democracy. It's anarchy. It's chaos. And there might be times in the French Revolution when people have the right to be indignant and the right to be expressive because they have some deeply rooted vision or opinion which under the status quo or the ancien regime might not find root for expression. Then you might actually, as a rare exception in history, you might be allowed to express your views in a forcible way. But in this particular case, the supporters of Mr. Trump do not seem to have, any universally acknowledged values. I mean, from my perspective, it's really hard to understand why in the United States these so-called white people have such a privilege to enter the U.S. Capitol without being hindered by the guardsmen. I mean, in Japan, we do, of course, have some people who, try to, enter the buildings from time to time, which is a rare, really rare occasion. But in this country, here in this country, we do not have this, ethnicity connotation. I mean, where if you belong to a particular ethnic group, you are more or less allowed to do whatever you would like to do. I mean, that's madness. That's really weird. I mean, if you're a black person, as many people have pointed out, this entry into the U.S. Capitol would not have been possible without being severely injured or even killed. So if you are a white person, as I have been saying, race is really, doubtful concept from contemporary scientific point of view. I mean, there are no race from my perspective. I am a member of the Society for Neuroscience, and it's academic circle where neuroscientists and people study the brain enrolled and report their research at annual conferences, and I'm always amazed to be questioned about your ethnicity and where you are African, black, Hispanic, Asian. These are irrelevant. Everything is continuum, and I can understand. I can see that in the United States, this concept of race, which I think is a pseudoscience, really, to be honest. I can see how in the United States this concept of race still has relevance, but it's really sad to see that these people, just because they are white, think that they have the power and authority to enter the U.S. Capitol with such a hubris, ignoring the results of democratic elections. That is pure madness, and it's really sad to see the United States, which I love. I love the United States. I mean, I love Apple computer. Not so much Windows, but I love Apple computer, and I'm capturing this video using my iPhone. America has produced a lot of great things like Facebook, Google, Twitter, which I use. I use Twitter, Google, Facebook. I use Amazon. All these wonderful startup companies and Elon Musk, SpaceX. These are wonderful fruits of the American spirit, which actually stresses the importance of grassroots movement, to question the status quo and to strive for achieving universal values, human rights, freedom. That's the United States I really admire, but not these people. I mean, these people were confident, I could say, from the video footage, from the New York Times, New Yorker video footage. These people were confident, but for no apparent reason. I couldn't understand why they were so confident. Just because they were white? Or just because they were supporters of Mr. Trump? I don't understand. Because these characteristics, being white or being supporters of Donald Trump, do not represent any universal values. Universal values that has made America such a great country. Universal values that really I admire. Like the think different ad from Steve Jobs. That was a wonderful ad. Or the 1984 ad from Apple. That was a wonderful ad. Because these advertisements celebrated human values, you know, creativity, freedom. But I couldn't see what the rioters who stormed the US Capitol represented, other than this groundless hubris as supporters of Mr. Trump. I didn't understand it, and I still don't understand it. And my impression was strengthened by watching this video released from the New Yorker reporter.